Welcome to Tales of Fae and Folk, and once again we are going to look at some more true fairy sightings, some classics and some that are actually just downright strange. Whatever the theme, I'm sure you will agree, they are all intriguing indeed. The true fairy sighting episodes I create are always done to celebrate wonder and people's strange experiences. I think we need a sense of wonder. I think it is part of the human condition. Sometimes the wonder comes in the form of spookiness or weird coincidences, playing prey to the cosmic joker maybe, and sometimes peculiar creature sightings and experiences involving what we would call fairies. They appear in so many different forms, and people have categorized them into individual races since time immemorial and in all countries. Each country has its own versions, but one common thing is that to experience a fairy sighting is a rare and thought-provoking thing indeed. So today let us look at some more fairy sightings from the collected works. In the Celtic country of Wales, part of the United Kingdom that sits to the far west there, is a very fairy folklore-filled place named Pentravolis, close to the beautiful mountainous region of Snowdonia. And this tale is interesting, as Wales is a country of singers, bards and the most amazing choirs. It was one lovely summer night when a man was travelling back to his home. He was so close to his cottage when he heard a strange sound, a singing so beautiful and delightful. This sound stopped him in his tracks. He stood listening, enchanted, simply lost in a reverie, and the sound filled him with a sense of the deepest joy. As he listened, he realized the sound was growing louder, and the singers were getting closer. Eventually this crowd of choral perfection came to where he was, and he saw a strange and wonderful sight. They were small, walking in single file, dressed in close-fitting clothes, all in shades of grey. Speckled dogs walked with them 2 deep, looking almost like marching soldiers. As this strange crowd came towards him, they stopped, and the small creatures spoke, begging him to go with them, but he refused. Time and again they coaxed and pleaded and begged him to follow. "Come away with us." But the man stood firm. He would not go with them. Finally they accepted that he would not be tempted, and so they began to move away. They divided themselves into 2 groups, he said, the dogs walking 2 by 2 in front of the small people. Still the strangers sang as they went on their way, and still it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. The man said he had stood by his home listening until the very last note had drifted away, before entering the safety of his home. Staying in Pentravolis, we have another interesting tale of a woman who was living at Hafodigarek. She was travelling home after church one Sunday when she came across a strange-looking dog that seemed sick, lying on the floor. Now, the woman remembered a local story of another woman of the same village who had lived in a cottage called Bryn Helyn, and that exactly this same thing had happened to her. This other woman had cursed the strange dog and had been cruel to it. The dog was presumed to be a pet of the fairies of the area, and they saw what she did. This woman had been cursed by them and had died. Knowing this, the church-going woman carefully picked up the dog and carried it home, She made it a soft bed for it to rest upon and gave it good food to eat. That night a group of strange folk appeared at her door and asked after the well-being of the dog. The woman told them that it was safe and it had started to look much better, and did they want to take it with them. These strange visitors were very pleased with the care of the dog, picking it up between them to take it with them, and asked the woman would she prefer a dirty cow or a clean cow. The woman thought, and she chose the dirty cow. The strangers left with the dog, and from that day her milk cows gave the richest and best milk of the whole of the area. A man living in County Donegal, a Neil Colton, told a tale of his childhood. It was midsummer, and he and his brother and one of his cousins were on the rocks on the countryside picking bilberries, also known as whortleberries. As they were busy collecting, they started to hear strange music. The boys rushed around the rocks to look where the sound was coming from. In front of them, not too far away, they saw a group of 6 or 8 beautiful fairy folk, and all of them dancing. These good folk noticed the little boys, and one of the fairy women who was dressed in red came running towards them. This woman struck the man's cousin across the face with what the boys thought was a green rush. The children sprang into action and ran home as fast as their legs could carry them, but when this cousin reached the cottage door, she grabbed for his brother and fell dead at once. His father had then grabbed his horse and saddled it and fled to fetch the local vicar, a Father Ryan. The priest then arrived, put his stole around his neck and began to pray over the little girl who seemed to be dead. He read psalms over her. He hit her softly and gently with his stole. Little by little she returned to consciousness and eventually was brought back to them. She was not dead at all. The priest told the family that had the girl not grabbed for the brother, the fairies would have taken her forever. A man, Mr. Craigan, recounted a tale from his youth in County Derry. Near his home was a plain of beautifully rich grazing land where a large herd of cattle would be let loose every year. 3 sides had a border that was a plantation of trees, and to the other a deep, dense, wild woodland. One summer evening, 5 men who were employed by the estate of the land were given instruction to drain the canal running through the middle of this plot of land. One of the men was a little older in years than the others. He walked near to a thorn bush growing from the side of the bank and had the most incredible experience. There, at the fairy thorn, he found a small man, about 18 inches tall, wearing a hat like a cone on his head and a red coat. The little man came out of the side of the bank and ran off as fast as a rabbit, as the man described. The man shouted to his friends to come and see, which they did, and as they reached him, they too saw this strange small creature being chased by their friend. The older man was keeping up well, but the little fellow simply sped along faster and faster. Eventually the strange small creature disappeared into another bank at the edge of one of the plantations. In the interview, the men admitted they had never believed in anything supernatural or fairies, but they were adamant about what they had seen, and they were telling the truth. In the East Riding of Yorkshire, a very respectable and well-regarded older woman told of an experience when she was a little girl. She had seen a troop of fairies. As a child, she had entered the parlour at her home one day and found a group of strange folk dancing in there. She noted that it was bright daylight. She could see perfectly clearly. She also said that her mother had always agreed with what her daughter had seen. In detail, the woman's mother had recorded the experience fully. She was 4 years old at the time, called Betsy, the eldest child of the household. It was a beautifully clear, sunny summer afternoon, towards evening, and Betsy had been playing in the garden. The girl came into the house via a passage that led from the kitchen. To the right of the entryway was an old parlour door. On the left of this, the sitting room. The mother who was telling the account could see both doors and the child. As the little girl entered the house, she paused before going into the sitting room and went towards the parlour door, which was slightly open. The mother watched her lift her hand to her body. She shrieked and fled back to her mother, crying loudly, "Oh, Mammy, Green Man will have me! Green Man will have me!" The older woman recounted it took a long, long time to calm her daughter down and be able to ask her what was actually the matter and what had scared her so badly. The small child explained, "Oh, Mammy, all Parlour is full of addlers and mentors." The mother surmised the child meant elves and fairies. The child then told the mother that the strange people were dancing. A little man in a gold lace hat with a green coat offered to take her hand so she could join him in the dance. Immediately the mother rushed to the parlour to see what on earth was going on, but everything had vanished. But her daughter remained terrified. A Mr. Jones told of his experience when he was a child, and he was most indignant that this was a true story and he was not a gullible man. As a child, he had been with his aunt travelling from Haverdafel to his father's house at Penyclown. They were walking past a field, and he noticed what looked like a sheepfold with the door standing open. He noticed that above the door was not a lintel, but instead a dried-up branch, possibly, he thought, from a hazel tree. In the field, he noticed there were a group of people. Some were inside the buildings, some more going in, and all bowed their heads as they passed beneath the tree branch. He could see there was a musician with them, and they seemed to have been dancing. Another figure was female, by the door and dressed in a crown and a red coat, who was finer dressed than the others, and who the others seemed to show respect to. To the day he recorded his sighting as a much older man, he still had the clearest vision of her pale white-skinned face and completely beautiful visage. The male figures wore white scarves, and all seemed to be from a time far back in history, and he could remember them as clearly as if he had only seen them the day before. What was puzzling to him, though, was that his aunt carried on as though she saw nothing, even though they were quite close by to the group. Until they were past this place, he said nothing at all to his aunt, but once they were clear, he told her what he had seen, and at the time she only told him he must have daydreamed. However, as they walked on, and on thinking of her nephew's tale and how he was as a young person, his aunt began to believe what he had seen. At home they told his mother, and what he could not believe that there was no sheepfold or building in that field at all. There were ruins of some kind of small building, but most of the stones and the rocks were covered by turf and soil. A Mrs. Hilda Gray contributed a tale of fairies in her garden in Warwickshire. This happened in August 1931. She and her eldest daughter had seen them, females without wings and wearing dresses that were filmy. The two ladies had seen these fairies on 8 occasions, always at the end of their garden in the flowering shrubs. The garden here had a border formed by a little brook. The woman saw one fairy lady on 3 separate days in a sort of pink garment, and the others were in blue tones. This fairy peeped at the woman shyly from around a bush, and as the woman walked nearer, to approximately 10 steps away, the fairy woman in pink disappeared completely. Mrs. Gray had the feeling that the fairy was not afraid of them, but did not actually want any contact with humans. She remembered the fairy women were around 1.5 feet tall or half a metre, look mid to late teenage, were very pretty and very graceful. From that day to the day of telling her experience, their loveliness was still sharp in her mind as though it had happened the day before. In Hampshire in 1952, a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Gall, had been busy creating a new garden at their home. Happy with their day's work, they went inside and started to relax in front of the fire. It fell to twilight and they were content talking over their day's hard work. Suddenly, they noticed something small flitting around the room, and as they looked, what they first thought to be an insect, they could see was a small fairy. The diminutive figure flew around the room twice and melted through the wall as quickly as it had come in. They described the fairy as around 9 or 10 inches tall, human-like in shape, with a brilliant silver radiance. She had a slightly luminous visage and transparent wings. They worked out that they had watched her for around 15 seconds, and on the figure disappearing through the wall, they both had looked at each other and asked, "Did you just see what I saw?" Friends, there we have another episode with a scattering of sightings of fairies and fairy folk. Now, if you liked the images of Marc's, my husband's, that I used in this episode, you can find them on various products in various locations which I have described below in the description box. I will definitely do more true fairy sightings because I find them quite comforting and relaxing and intriguing. I just love them. I hope you do too. So until next time, dear friends, take care, brightest of blessings, and remember, please don't play with the fairy folk, or you might end up in one of my folk tales yourself.